Well, hello class, and welcome to week 2 of our course. I hope you're doing well. I hope things are off to a good start for you. I wanted to touch base with you as the week is getting started and get you caught up, get you ready to go, make you aware of our assignments this week, and try to get things started off on the right foot. I want to begin by looking at our devotion for the week. Our devotion for this week is going to come from Mark chapter 6, and just wanted you to think about a few things as we consider Jesus' ministry. He ministered throughout the region in which he lived, and as you know, if you've ever ministered in the community in which you lived or grew up, you will find that sometimes that can cause some difficulties. And what we learn from Mark chapter 6 is that even in some very difficult times and in some hard circumstances, Jesus was still faithful to what God had called him to do. So let's look real quickly at a few things here from Mark chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. If you've got your Bible with you, you can follow along with me just as I share some thoughts with you. Jesus goes into his hometown, and there his disciples follow him. And we find out that on the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. And they asked, where did this man, talking about Jesus, get these things? You know, one of the first things we learn is that Jesus is faithful in the normal routine of his life. Now, that's just what Jesus did. Jesus traveled around and he taught. Specifically on the Sabbath, he would go into synagogues and he would teach. And so it didn't matter to him that he had come to his hometown. He didn't change his routine. He didn't change things up. Sometimes we're tempted to divert from our normal circumstances and divert from what we normally do because we face some difference or we face some different circumstance. And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're being faithful in the normal routine of the things that we do. We don't want to get sidetracked and go off into something else and do some other type thing. What we want to do is be faithful in the normal routine of our life. Look next. We see that we should be faithful no matter where we come from. You see in verse 3, they ask, is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. You know, they're offended by the fact that Jesus would dare to come in there and teach. He was a nobody. He was the son of a carpenter. He wasn't someone important. And yet he came in and he taught them. We know that Jesus, when he taught as someone with authority. He taught as someone with something to say, something important, something that was different and more and better than anything anyone had taught before. We need to be mindful of this, that no matter where you've come from, no matter what your background is, you need to be faithful. You know, some of you may have the chance to preach at great places, places that have names that are very important, churches that we would have heard of if you mention the name. And it doesn't matter if you've not come from somewhere prominent. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter who your parents were. We are called as ministers of the gospel to be faithful. Now look at the next thing here. We need to be faithful though we get no respect. Look in verse 4. And Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among his relatives and in his own household. Jesus, even though he was Christ, even though he was God, come and dwelt among these people, they gave him no respect. You know, sometimes pastors get this idea that they need to be respected. You know, in the culture in which I live and in the Bible Belt in North Carolina, we know that in the history, pastors were very respected in their community and people cared what they had to say and people sought after them for advice. And we should understand now that those things just don't happen. Whether you're in the Bible Belt, you're in the Northeast, you're out West, or you're in another culture around the world, we often do not get a lot of respect. And we should understand that it's not going to necessarily happen. It's not something that we should look for. We need to be faithful no matter whether we get respect from man or not. That is simply not something that we need to be looking out for. It's not something that we need to desire or dwell upon, but rather we should do the things that God has called us to do. Now, as we move into verse 5, we go from there and we see that we need to be faithful knowing that Jesus is at work. So he could do no mighty work there except he laid his hands on a few sick people and he healed them. It's just such a strange passage that we have here, that Jesus is somehow inhibited, or at least decides not to do work because of the lack of faith here. But what I'm drawn to is not that there is a lack of things that are going on, but even though these people had no faith, Jesus works anyhow. There are a few people who are healed. There are a few people whose lives are impacted by the arrival of Jesus. And so we need to be faithful in all that God's called us to do because He is at work. Then finally here, we need to be faithful and not surprised at the rejection of the gospel. He marveled, verse 6 says, he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went out among the villages teaching. Jesus marvels at their unbelief. What a sad commentary. These people who knew him, who had seen his life and his work and his ministry, they do not believe, and Jesus marvels at that. We need to be faithful and not surprised that there is a rejection in our culture of the gospel. There is a rejection among people we love of the gospel. We should not be offended by that. We should not be surprised by that, but rather we should continue to be faithful. I hope these words are encouraging to you, and I hope that's something that will challenge you and just remind you of our calling as ministers to be faithful. Let's look ahead at the assignments coming up this week. For your reading, you need to read from MacArthur chapter 3 and Spurgeon chapters 1 through 7. I would encourage you to take time with the Spurgeon text. Spurgeon is writing over 100 years ago. His writing is very good, but it is going to be different if you're used to reading books that have been written more currently, books that are not written in more Old English, and frankly, books that are just not written as well as Spurgeon writes. You need to take your time in reading through this so you can really grasp what Spurgeon is writing. There's a video this week. It's a presentation on the historical perspectives of pastoral ministry, and this is the first video in that series, so take time to watch that early in our week. For your discussion board, you're going to go back into Forum 1, and you're going to write 2 replies. These are due by Sunday. 2 replies from last week, and expect that people will be replying to your writing. Feel free to reply back to them, but you need to have 2 replies done by Sunday at 11:59. Now, your assignment. This is our first major assignment for the course, and so I hope you'll take the time to read through the assignment instructions that you can find in Blackboard. I've posted them here, but obviously it's more difficult for you to read them during a video format, and so take time. They're available to you in a Word document that you can download out of Blackboard. I'm going to be following these instructions when I am grading your paper. And so if you see something in here and it tells you that you need to have it and you don't have it, expect that that's going to cause a problem when I'm grading your paper. You will also find a rubric there that you can download. That rubric is how I will give your grade back to you. You can earn certain points within the rubric, and that total, whatever it comes up to, is what you're going to have. I don't sit and give you an overall grade, but rather I grade each element of the rubric, and it adds it together, and that's what you get. So make sure that you have the elements that the rubric calls for in your paper. The assignment is to talk with a pastor, associate pastor, youth pastor, someone with significant experience in the pastorate. Interview them about what they have experienced in ministry. Make sure that you present the questions, and this paper is going to be given back to me in a transcript format. The length should be at least 3 pages, but not to exceed 5 pages, with the 1-page summary included in the overall page count. Make sure you don't go over 5 pages, because I'll begin to deduct points, 5 points for each page that you're over. Make sure you use the proper formatting that you'll find in our style guide. Just so you know, this is our style guide. This is what it looks like. Make sure that you have this. I use this when I'm grading your paper. I check your footnotes, I check your formatting, and I want to make sure you have this correct. So if you do not have a copy of this in your library, get one. It will help you tremendously with this course. You have 2 main sections that I mentioned here: pastor's name and church. make sure you give me that information. I want to know that this is a real pastor, not someone you just made up, so that you could answer the questions and make the assignment easier on yourself. And then here are some questions that are provided. Again, they're available to you in the Word document. I would encourage you just to copy and paste them out of that Word document and use them when you're doing the questions. Now, there is a caveat to that. If you just do the questions that are on here, you just type out what the pastor says, and you don't spend a lot of time asking follow-ups, you don't think about other ways to look at the pastoral life, you don't give additional questions to him, your paper is looking at a B or a C. That's just average work. Everybody can do that. It doesn't take a lot of thought. It doesn't take a lot of extra effort. If you put in the extra effort, that's when you achieve excellence. If you look at our grading rubric for this class, average will not give you an A by the time this class is over. You have got to seek after excellence in our course, and by doing so, you're going to find that your grade is going to be much improved. Again, this is due on Sunday of this week, 11:59 p.m. Please turn it in on time. At 12 a.m., it is late, and that is an automatic 10% deduction. So you don't want to do that. Turn it in at least a minute earlier than that. Get it in at 11:59. If you have questions this week, please let me know. If there's something that I can do to help you, if there's ways that you need to improve your writing, if you're not happy with your grades as we go through this class, text me, email me, call me, and I'll be glad to help you get back on the right track, help you get where you're wanting to go, help you improve anything that's going on. Please don't get stuck. If you are needing help and you email me, work on something else until I get back to you, and I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. I hope the Lord will bless you this week. I hope He will help you as you study, and I hope that this class will be an encouragement to you. God bless you.